President Trump makes a big global assurance. American boots won't touch the ground in Ukraine. Plus, a New York Post exclusive. Russiagate strikes again. Tulsi Gabbard strips officials current and former of security clearances, a reprisal for the 2016 election interference probe. And Kohberger the creep. New documents revealed deranged details about convicted killer Bryan Kohberger. I'll tell you why his coworkers filed more than a dozen complaints about him. Those stories and more today, Wednesday, August 20th. I'm Caitlin Becker, and this is the New York Postcast. First, we had Alligator Alcatraz, then the Speedway Slammer, and now the Cornhusker Clink. That's the new nickname for a migrant detention center in Nebraska. This is the third such facility from the Trump administration to house illegal migrants across the U.S. Following an agreement between ICE and Nebraska's Department of Corrections, 280 migrants will be housed in the Work Ethic Camp facility, which was originally designed to minimize overcrowding in state prisons. The facility has 200 beds right now, but there is an expansion plan to accommodate the anticipated ramp up in deportations. Nebraska Governor Jim Pillen told the Post that the Cornhusker Clink is just one of several ways his state is stepping up to, quote, protect our homeland. Funding for the facility comes straight out of the president's big, beautiful bill, now a big law with a big stimulus for law enforcement. It also follows the opening of a similar facility in El Paso, Texas, with 1,100 beds, nicknamed the Lone Star Lockup. ICE currently has in the neighborhood of 59,000 migrants in custody in the U.S. Now, several states, private contractors, and ICE have announced the opening or expansion of at least 11 facilities for illegal migrants, adding more than 18,000 new beds. Now, a New York Post exclusive. Another day, another reason to talk about Russiagate. The newest twist. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard is stripping away security clearances for 37 current and former government officials over the 2016 scandal. According to a memo first obtained by the Post, Gabbard accuses the named individuals of, quote, politicizing and manipulating information. The biggest name on the list is Vin Nguyen, the former top aide to Obama-era Director of National Intelligence James Clapper. Several of the officials played some role in the controversial intelligence assessment of Russian influence in the 2016 election of President Donald Trump. The order takes effect immediately. It bars officials from access to classified systems, facilities, materials, and information. In a statement, Gabbard said that the group listed in the order betrayed their oath to the Constitution. And now to Idaho, where investigators released a second trove of investigatory documents related to the Bryan Kohberger case, more than 550 pages, shedding light on the brutality of the quadruple homicide, the incredible efforts of the Moscow Police Department who ran down hundreds of tips, and about the killer himself. His favorite movie? American Psycho, what he watched on television in jail, court TV, and coverage of his own case. Go-to topic of conversation with coworkers? Ted Bundy. As we well know, Kohberger hasn't revealed his motive for stabbing to death Maddie Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle in 2022. But his relationship towards women might help make some sense of things. Investigators learned that while working as a teaching assistant in the criminology department at Washington State University, Kohberger had more than a dozen complaints filed against him over his treatment of female students and colleagues. Witnesses described Kohberger as creepy, condescending, rude, with an intense, almost aggressive staring problem. Women in the department said that he would argue constantly with them and then later follow them to class, to their cars, to their offices, forcing some people to have others escort them around for safety. And the irony of ironies here, the convicted multi-murderer reportedly was the only one in class that supported the death penalty, the very thing he was facing for slaughtering those 4 University of Idaho students before he copped a plea to save his own hide. Now to our big story, the hope for brokered peace in Ukraine. On the heels of President Trump's meetings with Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin, there's optimism for bringing an end to a war that's raged for 3+ years. That said, there are clear roadblocks to peace. The biggest one is at the very heart of the war itself. Russia wants Ukraine's land, in particular for Zelensky to surrender Donetsk, where Russia currently controls some but not all of the region. On the flip side, Ukraine wants Russia to permit a NATO-style security guarantee. The U.S. remains hopeful that it can bridge that pretty big gap, but there are also red lines for what President Trump is willing to do to broker a deal. On Fox News, Trump spelled out one thing he promises not to do in Ukraine and one thing he might.
Mr. President, what kind of assurances do you feel like you have that going forward and, past this Trump administration, it won't be American boots on the ground defending that border?
Well, you have my assurance, I'm president. When it comes to security, they're willing to put people on the ground. We're willing to help them with things, especially probably if you talk about by air, because nobody has the kind of stuff we have. Really, they don't have. But I don't think it's going to be a problem.
While open dialogue is good, it has not stopped Russian bombs from wreaking havoc. Hours before Zelensky huddled with Trump in Washington, Russian ballistic missiles killed at least 3 people in Kharkiv, including a 2-year-old boy. Joining me now to get an update on the battlefield, New York Post Washington correspondent Caitlin Dornbos. Caitlin, in the wake of these meetings, is there any indication that Putin is actually serious about peace? Does it feel any different this time around?
No. I wish I could say that I had a lot of hope that President Putin of Russia was going to really take this seriously. But if you just look to literally hours after he hung up the phone with President Trump on Monday night, I don't even think it was hours when he launched the largest attack on Ukraine in a month.
The largest attack in a month right after that call?
Right after that call. And we've heard from President Trump in the past being very frustrated with Putin attacking Ukraine after immediately promising that he's ready for peace and he's ready for a ceasefire. And it's just this continual habit of his to follow up those promises with horrible attacks that really don't signify that he's willing to give up his war. Again, you're hearing these nice words that President Trump has talked about being followed up with terrible attacks. There were more than 15 people killed over this past weekend after Trump met with Putin in Alaska, including a 1.5-year-old and her 15-year-old brother. I mean, these attacks that are happening there are brutal. They have lost more people than... So there's a new report out that says that they have lost at least 13,000 civilians since Russia launched its war in February of 2022.
I just got chills when you said
that. I know.
That's
to put that in perspective,
remarkable number of people.
It's about 5 times as many people as we lost in Afghanistan during the 20-year war there. So huge numbers of civilian innocent people. This isn't even counting the thousands and thousands of more who are killed on the battlefield, who are actually fighting in the war. These are just people trying to live their lives. So I think we're going to have to see some real action by Putin behind his words of promises that he's willing to work towards peace, because I gotta say, it is just so disheartening after watching what happened Monday, which I just thought was such a huge success for foreign policy and a huge success that President Trump can hang his hat on in actually getting European leaders to the table to talk about providing security guarantees to Ukraine and actually see a real ending to this war. That is, if Putin allows the end of the war to actually happen.
Well, Putin is now the boy who cried peace. He says it when everyone wants to hear it and then just basically turns right around and does the exact opposite of that. So with no sanctions in the pipeline and a ceasefire not on the table, is that giving Russia a pass to just kind of kill indiscriminately? Do you feel like those things would rein him in?
I think we have a perfect example of how even just the threat of sanctions works. When President Trump really was serious about laying down specific secondary sanctions that would have targeted Russian oil, that's when Putin was willing to finally come to the table and say, okay, yeah, I'll meet with you, Trump, in person. I'll talk about being serious about ending this war. So we've already seen how sanctions do play out in real effects and do affect President Putin. Now, I think President Trump wants to give Putin more time to come to the table because he's encouraged by his words. But sooner or later, I mean, just kind of after analyzing the president's mindset, I really think he's going to have to make a decision on actually implementing those sanctions, because Putin is just not showing his actions where his words are being met.
And really, how can negotiations continue? How can the politicking of it all keep going when on the ground people are dying? I mean, you've been there. You've been on the ground when bombs are raining down. The reality of the situation there, it's terrifying and it's bleak. So it does seem that reasonably something like that would need to stop in order for any progress to be made.
It certainly seems to be that case. And to me, having been there on the ground multiple times, like you said, we were just on this show less than a month ago when I had, run over next door, quite literally, to a missile strike that had injured, a lot of people. The thing about it is President Trump says, well, I haven't needed a ceasefire to end all of the other wars that are happening in the world. Because, he's put a stop to 5 conflicts now, essentially. But the thing is the Ukraine war is very different. And unfortunately, no one besides Special Envoy Keith Kellogg from the Trump administration have come to Ukraine to actually see for themselves what's going on in the war. That's why we at The Post are so passionate, or at least me. I'm very passionate about going to Ukraine so that the American people and our, wonderful president can actually see what's happening in Ukraine and make better decisions. Because without a full understanding and a full grasp of what's happening there, it is easy to kind of just think, okay, well, I haven't needed a ceasefire in these other conflicts. What's so different about Ukraine? Well, the difference is that people are dying in mass there. And so, I don't know. Trump still wants a ceasefire, but he seems to have been convinced by Putin that a ceasefire isn't necessary.
The realities of war so much different than talking about it theoretically and from the confines and safety of a different country where bombs aren't dropping. Our Caitlin Dornbos, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now from our friends at Page 6. I just can't believe it. Fakes are a dime a dozen in Las Vegas. Fake tans, fake bags, fake diamonds, never mind. Fake celebrities. Not as common, aside from Elvis impersonators, I guess. So when Justin Bieber bopped into a glitzy nightclub at the Wynn, nobody thought anything of it. The main act for the night, DJ Griffin, was told that the Biebs wanted to do a surprise performance. That tracks. He has a new song on the charts. The slender, tattooed heartthrob showed up shirtless, wearing shades, low-slung jeans, to sing Sorry. Griffin spun the 2015 Bieber hit on the turntables. Everybody in the crowd was delighted. What a time to be alive. Sorry is the operative word here, because Faustin Bieber over there was actually 29-year-old Dylan Declo, like Dylan Rando. Bootleg Bieber eventually got kicked off the stage by Wynn staff, but he did have time to perform a few Bieber songs and rack up a $10,000 bar tab, which he reportedly had to fork over. Yeah, $10K on his way out. I don't know who is that laying around. The DJ posted later, and I quote, "How Bustin' Jeeber duped me on my own set. Is it too late now to say sorry, Bustin'?" And finally, who doesn't love a chunky pet? A tubby tabby cat, a pudgy pug, a beefy beagle? Well, that extra weight can put stress on our furry friends, and we want them here as long as possible. So how do you put Fido on a diet? Pharmaceutical companies may soon have an answer to that. Following the success of GLP-1s like Ozempic with humans, we might soon see similar weight loss drugs for pets. The thinking is that the same science that helped 2 legs shed extra pounds would help 4 legs the exact same way. One biotech firm anticipates it will roll out a pet-friendly version of Wegovy by the end of the decade. So not soon, but still soon. This company, Okeva, says that the drug will take the form of a long-lasting implant, roughly the size of a standard tracking chip, and it'll work for up to 6 months. The pharmacist behind this gave some reassurances that it's not going to make your pet stop eating. It will make them eat more appropriate portion sizes. Okay, so Ozem puppies. Would you get it for your pet? I don't know. I want to know. Let me know what you think in the comments. And yes, Lord, save me. I read the comments. My old dog Gigi, rest her blessed soul, absolutely needed this. She would have taken someone's life and limb for a rawhide. Gigi was precious, but that dog was an absolute unit. Actually, our sweet, sweet dog Kira actually probably needed that too. The photos for this story are a 10 out of 10, so check out the New York Post in print or online so you can see them because chonky pets are cute. And don't forget, like and subscribe to the New York Post cast wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I know now that I said all of that, I kind of sound like an overfeeder of animals, but I assure you, my kitty Khaleesi is quite svelte.